So we're at the Pima Aerospace Museum. We just hopped in a golf cart to do a quick tour of our outside grounds, which is about 80 acres. There's roughly half of the collection is outdoors, half indoors. Some of the more popular aircraft get stored indoors, as well as the more historic, all our World War II aircraft go indoors. But we've got a lot outside to show you too, and some of the really cool things to see are out here when you can take a tram tour or explore on your own. This is a really cool latest edition right there. Designed off of the Mustang, but used for close air support and ground attack versus as a fighter. This is our helicopter area. So a lot of US, but there's Soviet as well. Behind the helicopters is some of our art planes. Built of its kind. It had a lot of unique designs. It was the first to incorporate the honeycomb technology, so lighter weight for the inside structural component. It wasn't the safest aircraft, and so it didn't remain in service for very long. And it's very expensive to fly, but its abilities were way ahead of its time. Got 3 B-52s, which is kind of an American icon. 2 on display right now, and we have a 3rd back in restoration. This one was a part of Operation Secret Squirrel, which at the time was the longest mission ever flown non-stop. Arguably the biggest crowd pleaser right here, the B-36 PEACEMAKER. It's the largest bomber we've ever put into production. It's got 10 engines. They say 6 turn-in, 4 burn-in. There's 4 jet engines on the sides there. The pusher propeller configuration, 230-foot wingspan. It really is a beast, and used for carrying nuclear weapons across the world if need be. It's the last biggest bomber we ever built right there. B-47 is another really popular one. Its design ended up playing into how commercial aviation was done. The overall swept wing, aerodynamics of it. There's a C-54. It's in the Berlin Airlift. During the Berlin Airlift, there was a guy named Gail Halverson, got the nickname the Candy Bomber. He flew a C-54 like this one, and the largest airlift in history still. Kind of the first Cold War victory for the West. And while we were bringing in tons and tons of supplies for people to live, necessities, he had the idea of putting parachutes on candy and dropping them for the kids, and the outcome was that it gave the kids who didn't even have enough to survive at the time because of the blockade, but gave them hope. sign says President Kennedy and Johnson had this as a designated Air Force One. Given that the jet age was already taking over, both presidents preferred to fly in the 707, or the militarized 707. But it was the last designated Air Force One that was propeller powered, and then they moved on to this one, which also had flown Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. Was designated Air Force Two a couple times as well, and Freedom One call sign was given to it a couple times. It brought the Tehran hostages back, and then again, Gulf War prisoners of war. So when it flew them back to America, when they were repatriated, this plane brought them back. These two were both Eisenhowers. That helicopter was a part of the first group of helicopters called the Executive Flight Detachment that flew the president for the first time. So what is now, Marine One, that's where it all started with Eisenhower. And then this is Columbine, eventually Columbine 1, Columbine 2, and 3, also flown by Eisenhower, were the first officially designated Air Force Ones. The centerpiece of this hangar is the B-29. This one flew over 30 missions in the Pacific Theater, World War II. It was there on VJ Day as part of the Show of Force flyover. When Japan officially surrendered in Tokyo Bay, this flew overhead. It was the largest, highest flying, fastest bomber of its time. It's an icon for World War II, and it's huge, and then you compare it to the B-36 outside, and it looks tiny. But this is a really cool feature, and you can walk underneath it and see the bomb bays, and one of the bombs is still up there, for display. It introduced a lot of new features too. It was the first to use remote-controlled guns. It was the first pressurized bomber, so you have this crawl tube leading from the front to the back to keep the compartments pressurized. This is one of the bomb bays, and then watch your head, but this is the second bomb bay. And the crew of this aircraft, unofficially named Sentimental Journey, has visited before, and they've donated some items. This took some flack, and there was a hole in the cabin back here. So what the crewman did is stuffed these gloves in it to maintain pressure, and he ended up donating them to the museum. We do our own restoration, which a lot of that work is refurbishments, like repainting the aircraft. Like I said earlier, half of them are outside. So we do keep the paint up as much as possible. And then we get opportunities to do, really cool historic restorations like this one, where we're bringing back to life an aircraft that, was in pieces, and almost, you know, unidentifiable. So we've got this one, another one we did recently that was in the bottom of it was shot down, actually pushing Nazis out of the siege of Leningrad, which is the 900-day siege. So it was, when it finally broke, this aircraft, the Soviet Il-2 STRUMOVIK, was pushing them away, and it was shot down and landed on a frozen lake. When the lake melted, it fell down. It's, again, another one that spent 50 years in the submerged. And yeah, and so we get these things in you know, in countless pieces, caked with mud. However, you know, and the before and after photos are really something, but they get to, you know, a lot of it is, if we can find parts from other aircraft in you know, in other boneyards or salvage yards, sometimes we'll use other parts. Some of it's, you know, we manufacture here. Sometimes we have to outsource it to, you know, professional of their own craft. But yeah, we get to do that here. The restoration facility is definitely something that allows us to keep a collection like this and show such rare, you know, you'll never see an A-20 and an IL-2 STURMOVIK and some of the things that we have all in one place, like you see them here. They're incredibly rare. And you know, I don't even, the IL-2 STURMOVIK, which was in Hangar 3, is, you know, I don't even think most Americans would know about it, but it's the most built military aircraft of all time. It's just so rare. This is a very commonly told story, but this P-51, excuse me, D model is the most common, the most built model. Our version is actually restored from a couple different P-51s. So when that happens, when we have to take several aircraft to make one display model, it kind of gives us the freedom to tell a story with the aircraft. And the story that we're telling here with this one is from Lieutenant Curtis, who is one of just a few pilots to get the hat trick on the Axis. So he's got kill marks for Nazi, Italy, and Japanese. And then you'll also see the American flag on there, which is what really makes the story unique. He found a cargo plane who had lost communications and running out of fuel, about to land on a Japanese-controlled airstrip. He knew that if that plane landed there with all its passengers, they'd be killed or tortured. So he took out the engines and forced it to ditch over water. Everyone survived. They were all rescued. But because he was able to shoot down the American plane, he ended up saving all their lives. He ended up marrying one of the nurses that was on that cargo plane. These kamikaze planes are pretty cool. These are two purpose-built kamikaze aircraft. So after a while, Japanese didn't want to keep crashing their fighter planes, so they started building planes like these, where this one over here was dropped from a bomber, so it had a mothership, and essentially a man-guided missile. So no landing gear on that one. This one would drop its landing gear after takeoff. So these are, you know, these are cheaply built, definitely designed to not return aircraft that the Japanese started implementing towards the end of World War II.
Is that unusual that you would have these aircraft?
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. I think that the display in itself is pretty unusual, and to have two of them. And, you know, these two are aircraft, well, obviously, that never went into service because they wouldn't be here. But some of them, you know, a lot of the designs of the era didn't even go into production. It was such a late thought in the war, like, oh no, we're running out of fighters, that, you know, this concept came in. And it's, you know, it's a very unique concept in all of history, to even have an airplane that's not designed to return. It's a ground attack aircraft, fighter. Concept is kind of similar to the modern day A-10. Really heavy armor, built to destroy ground forces. This particular aircraft flew for the Soviet Union up in the Leningrad area after the almost 900-day siege. This aircraft was there pushing Nazis away and shot down, and they crash landed on a frozen lake. When the lake melted, this aircraft sunk, and it was there for nearly 50 years. We just recently restored it a couple years ago, got to put it on display. It's one of very few, especially in the western part of the world, but it's the most built military aircraft of all time. A lot of them were scrapped or shot down in World War II, but 36,000 of these existed at some point. And the reason is a direct call from Joseph Stalin. He contacted the manufacturer, and famous quote saying that we need IL-2s more than we need bread and water for the army. So they started pumping these out. After Stalin gives you that kind of encouragement, your life could depend on it. This is a good example of an aircraft where we put in all of our methods to complete this restoration. I mean, we put tons of our own money and man hours into it. Most of what you see, I mean, we're talking like a piece here and a piece here and just all over the place. Putting it all back together and everything was us. But we went all out and got replica rockets made for it, and really completed what it would look like in World War II, which no one person can do. So this is a great example of how far the museum goes to put an accurate representation of the aircraft out there.
Well, because it doesn't fly, can't you kind of skimp on parts somewhat? Because let's say you don't find exactly the propeller blade you want, do you ever just make something similar?
So sometimes things like I don't know. I think propellers are a little bit easier, but a lot of parts, yeah, we can make replicas for, or manufacture our own nose, or if need be, or something like that. But with them being static displays, we don't do much to the inside. So we're not rebuilding an engine, or most of the interiors in general, speaking of the aircraft, are as delivered. So if it's in good condition when it comes, it stays in good condition. If it's not, then it stays in bad condition. We paint our outside aircraft windows not to hide the interior, but that's just to protect the glass in the cockpit from the sun, so that they stay in good condition. But all the interior aircraft aren't painted that way. You can look inside of them and see what it looks like. And like the case of the B-24. This was flown back here by our volunteers in the 70s. They had to learn how to fly this plane, 30 years after the war, but it's still in that condition. All the fluids are drained, and interesting story about this bomber is it was a Lend-Lease program, so it flew for the RAF, Royal Air Force. When the war ended, it was left in India with their presence there. The Indian Air Force eventually was able to take enough parts of B-24s that the Royal Air Force left there and create some flying B-24. So they actually operated this after World War II. When we found out about it, we asked to purchase it, and museum staff and volunteers learned how to fly it back. So on this side of it, we have its Royal Air Force markings paying homage, and then on the other side is the Indian Air Force markings paying homage to that. The V1, it's the buzz bomb. This was the beginning of the doomsday weapons that Hitler was creating, and it's technically the world's first operational cruise missile. but you know, sending him over to England as a part of their invasion. Another really rare thing that we have here on display. This is the Hawker Hurricane. So famous for use in the Battle of the Britain, the workhorse of the Battle of the Britain. Between this plane and the Supermarine Spitfire, it kept Nazi Germany out of England. Another one of those planes that was rebuilt out of several hurricanes, so kind of giving us the freedom to tell a story with it. And this one is painted in the markings of pilot L.C. Wade, who became America's top ace to fly for a foreign Air Force. So he volunteered, kind of like in Pearl Harbor, the movie, Ben Affleck goes and volunteers. Well, this is what L.C. Wade did, and he learned to fly in Tucson, so that's why we chose him, besides his feats. But he learned to fly in Tucson. He ended up volunteering for the Royal Air Force, and I'm struggling to remember if this is the final number, but I want to say 23 kills, and a couple of them were in a plane that would have looked just like this. Douglas C-47, this is the oldest surviving example. Obviously the stripes on this are going to be distinctive, and that's how we painted Allied ships, especially for operations like D-Day, which is what this model, the C-47, is really famous for. It was the transport for the paratroopers on D-Day. But it was used in every theater of the war. Eisenhower said this is one of the most useful tools of World War II. It could be considered the most important airplane of the war. This is the Aerospace Gallery. We recently renamed it, formerly the Space Gallery, but we put a lot of things in here in relating to technology, so renamed it the Aerospace Gallery, and some of that is you'll see up on the roof is we have a history of unmanned aerial vehicles in here now, and a new centerpiece in the back that we can go take a look at here in a sec is one of two Blackhawks that could be flown as a drone, be flown fly-by-wire or with a pilot. Lots of unmanned aerial vehicles. We've got the X-15 mock-up, which is fastest rocket plane of all time. The B-52 we have in restoration right now was the actual mothership for one of two B-52s that was a mothership for the X-15 program. This is the newest feature to the Aerospace Gallery. It is what space shuttle astronauts trained on. So landing, takeoff, the whole shebang was trained in this, it's called the Fixed Base Guidance and Navigation Simulator. We got it just recently because after the space shuttle program, obviously not used anymore, but a film company purchased it, and this was just featured in the movie Moonfall that came out a couple of months ago. So you'll see Halle Berry and her co-stars in this, and then it was donated to the museum. So really exciting to be able to display this. It's a very rare thing to be able to display in the way that it is, because the movie set went through a ton of effort to fix lighting and make it as presentable as possible for what a space shuttle pilot would look like in it. And so we get to display it now after all that effort that the movie company put into it. This It's the Apollo Command Module. It's a mock-up, so this wasn't a simulator, but this was used by, I want to say Walter Cronkite, one of the news anchors at the time of the Apollo missions, to talk about what was going on up there. And then also used in the Apollo 13 movie, so Tom Hanks and fellow actors. Another project of ours, we've got the Titan Mist Museum, the Arizona Aviation Hall of Fame, and Pima Air and Space Museum. That's the Black Hawk I was talking about. That was one of two that could be flown remotely. This is Hangar 1. Everyone sees this hangar, but not everyone makes it out of this hangar. I think there's so much to see in here that you could easily spend your whole day just in here and not realize everything that comes out on the grounds and in the other hangars. This is the F-14 Tomcat, made popular by Top Gun. I'm told that this version was in the movie, but this particular aircraft, but not flying as a background prop. I don't know how true that is, but that's what I was told. Probably one of the more photographed examples. Everybody likes the shark mouth. Women in Flight gallery here. So we've got aircraft that were piloted by women. We've got donations from female pilots. The one in the back there is the type of airplane that Amelia Earhart tried to fly around the world. All sorts of history about women in aviation there. Proud of that exhibit. Lockheed Model 10 Electra. This is the type of plane that Amelia Earhart attempted to circumnavigate the world in. Obviously not the plane that was done in, because that one was never recovered, but same model. The museum sponsors a French aerobatics pilot, and so she's got a whole list of achievements, like the first woman to run a Red Bull Air race, first woman ever at the Indy track, Indy 500. So she's really, one of the things about our partnership with her is she will be donating her airplane that she does the aerobatics into the museum once she's done using it. So that'll be this gallery's next edition when that happens. SR-71 Blackbird is definitely a huge draw for people to Pima Air and Space Museum. This example flew for NASA as a test aircraft for the Air Force. SR-71 Blackbird is the fastest air-breathing airplane ever built. Holds that record. Mach 3 aircraft. So this thing was fast. It's made out of titanium alloy, which the U.S. didn't even have enough of to build these aircraft back at the time. So we got covert and purchased the titanium from Soviet Union, built the aircraft, and then spied on them with it. Just a ton went into the display. Here is really cool. We've got the nose cone display, the pilot display. We've got the D-21 drone that the concept was not on this aircraft, but they did make a member of the Blackbird family that this drone would sit on top. So not only would it go you know, Mach 3 or whatever, they would put a drone and launch the drone off the top of that. It was not the safest idea, so it did not go into full production. But there's just a lot to see. We've got the engine start kit in the back. We've got the parachute brake on display over there. A whole lot of information about the SR-71 Blackbird here. Yeah, I mean, it's one of America's favorite. It's, you know, it's American ingenuity at its finest right here. The A-10 is so famous. People make memes about this thing all the time. I don't know if you've ever seen the brr memes. Its ground attack capability it's insane, and they're sturdy. People love them. It's a close air support ground attack role, so it's not a fighter, but I think between the power and its sort of ugly charm, people just love them. You can actually you see the gun that's inside of this. They like to say that it's a plane built around a gun, and yeah, I mean when you look at it and how long it is, this is what's inside the aircraft. It's pretty insane, and you can see the rounds that they fire from it in the glass case there. This is kind of a cool spot because we've got four different aerial demonstration team aircraft on display here. We've got the Royal Air Forces with the Hawk there, Blue Angels, Thunderbirds, and then this one was also an Australian Air Force aerial demonstration team. This is the BEDE MICROJET. It was featured in a James Bond movie, which is hilarious because he's like flying through barns and doing his James Bond stuff, and then he pulls up to a gas station to fill it up at the end of the scene. It's worth checking out, that one. Holds the record for the world's smallest biplane. So biplane with two wings, top and bottom there. Yeah, that was the whole purpose of this aircraft, was to set the record. He actually, the signage shows the picture there. He made the world's smallest aircraft. He got in competition with somebody who actually made a smaller one, and then on his second attempt, he got the smallest biplane. So.
this one never got into combat, but I flew airplanes that were this same model. This is a G model, and I flew F models also. Most of my time was in the older model, the F model. I got there in 1943 in November. 35 crews of us arrived in the 390th. We all trained together up in the state of Washington. So I have them all in one place. I can find out what happened. 35 crews. They told us if you fly 25 missions, you can go home.
I heard that. How many missions did you fly?
28. So they lied just a little bit.
And the B-17 mainly did day runs over
Only day runs.
over Germany. There were raids.
Never flew at night, and took off in dark sometimes, and we hope not to get back in the dark because landing systems were so primitive in England in those days. So we wanted to get back while we could see our field and get it on the ground. But the typical mission was 7 to 7.5 hours. That's average. My longest was 11 hours and 20 minutes. But that one was because we were trying to bomb an aircraft factory over in Posen, Poland. So we went clear through Germany, got into Poland, and we ran into bad weather and couldn't get to our target. So we turned around and bombed a secondary target, which was Posen, Poland. So it was 11 hours and 20 minutes in the air. That's a long time in this bucket of bolts.
Did you have a heated suit?
No, they were available. I didn't need it in the cockpit. We had a little warm air pumped in to defrost our windshield as long as number 2 engine was running. It came from the manifold of number 2 engine. So it was a little warm. It didn't make it comfy, cozy. The floor was always sub-zero in temperature. And it was cold in the cockpit, but that little warm air did help. I wore a lot of clothes, but I didn't wear the electric suit. I was on the first full daylight raid on Berlin. Now, when I say Berlin, we were not bombing the city of Berlin. We were bombing targets around the edge of Berlin. Because we had the Norden bomb site, we could bomb specific targets rather than just dribble them across the city. So that day, 821 heavy bombers took off back in England. Some of them were spares, so as we climbed out, the spares either were used if an airplane broke something, engine went out or whatever, the spare pulled in and took that place while we were climbing out. When we had finished climbing and were out over the water, the broken ones went back home or the spares went back home. So we crossed into enemy territory that day with 750 heavy bombers. We lost 69 heavy bombers over Germany. But that's the first time a mass of airplanes got to Berlin and bombed targets around the edge of Berlin. Hermann Goering, the chief of the Luftwaffe, had made a statement, American bombers will never get to Berlin. Well, at great cost, we proved him wrong. 69 went down over Germany. Some of the ones that made it back never flew again. But one of ours in our bomb group got back, crash landed on the base, and was so badly damaged that they scrapped it. It couldn't be repaired. But I was on that mission, and they estimated that we were attacked, our formation was attacked by 600 enemy aircraft on our way in and on our way out. 600 enemy airplanes. We had some of our own fighters. I saw some, but I saw more of the other kind. The lead airplane, the Bombardier, flew the airplane only on the bomb run. And that was because the pilot flipped the switch that connected the autopilot to the bomb site. So when he made corrections on the bomb site, the airplane did what was needed. All other 20 in the formation followed that lead airplane.
When you weren't doing your 28 missions, what were you doing in your off time?
They always had some kind of duties for us. We were at times we were going through every item of mail that was sent out of the base and censoring mail. That was one of the duties we had. We flew other missions, test flights and so forth around the airport, around our airport. And we flew practice missions occasionally. And so there was always something going on that kept us busy.